All right, how we doing, everybody? So today we're going to sit down and talk through some of the stuff we can see in chapter 15, a chapter on unemployment. Very big, huge topic for us to dive into, but we'll keep it pretty brief, just stick to the basics today. So let's dive on in. Well, the first thing we need to do is get on the same page about who is and who is not employed, unemployed, in the labor force, out of the labor force, an adult, not an adult. So we can start by saying, okay, everybody in our country, right? So everybody in our country is going to include, everybody. The kids, the adults, the people, the retirees, the workers, the not workers, everybody. Well, then we want to take out everybody under the age of 16. That's the kids. So we're left with an adult population. So we've taken out everybody under the age of 16 and we're left with an adult population. So now we can divide that adult population into those in the labor force and not in the labor force. And then we can further divide the labor force into the employed and the unemployed. So we can see how this is broken up and that there's a whole bunch of employed, a little bit of unemployed, and a whole bunch of not in the labor force. So let's move on and try and clarify what kind of people are we talking about here. So who is this group that is not in the labor force? Well, we are talking about people that are students, people that are stay-at-home parents, people that are retirees, anybody that doesn't work and isn't looking for a job, right? Doesn't work and isn't looking. Those folks are going to be considered not part of the labor force. So who makes up the labor force? Well, the labor force is going to be made up of the employed as well as the unemployed. And let's be careful with the way we define everybody here. So as far as employed, this is kind of the easy part. This is the paid workers, full-time and part-time are going to count. People who are self-employed and as well those who are working for family businesses. Now in regards to the unemployed, there's going to be two groups of those who have actively looked for a job in the last 4 weeks but have not yet found one, and those waiting to be called back to a job they have temporarily been sent home from. So you're not laid off yet, just because of whatever economic situation. We can't have you guys working today, but we will need you shortly. Okay, so that's who makes up the labor force. The labor force is simply the employed plus the unemployed. So like I just said, the labor force is simply the number of employed plus the number of unemployed. So let's try and figure out that our unemployment rate is going to be equal to the number of unemployed divided by the labor force. So what is this? It's the percentage of the labor force that is unemployed. So the labor force makes up everybody who has a job or everybody who's actively trying to get a job, right? So this asks, what proportion of the people that are either working or wanting to work are the portion that don't have a job right now, right? That is a question. That is the question our unemployment rate asks, right? Another relevant number is going to be labor force participation rate. And this is the percentage of total adult population that is in the labor force. So same kind of idea. The number that's in the labor force divided by the number that's in the adult population, multiplied by 100. Of course, you just multiply by 100 to turn a fraction into a percentage. That's all we're trying to do with that. Multiply by 100 there at the end. So the labor force divided by the adult population, well, that just tells us of everybody, what percent are either working or actively looking for a job, right? The employed as well as the unemployed are going to count in the labor force. So are these numbers measuring what we want to? Sort of, yes. It's a little complicated. As far as unemployment rate, we would want the unemployment rate to go down because people are getting jobs and the economy's growing perhaps. But it does go down for that reason, which is good. But it also goes down when people leave the labor force altogether. We call them often discouraged workers, people that have been looking for a job for a while and just have given up, right? So they haven't actively looked for a job in the last 4 weeks. They leave the group of unemployed and enter those not in the labor force, right? So I think either of these numbers, unemployment rate and labor force participation rate, looked at alone, kind of in a vacuum, are not going to tell you what you think that they're telling you. So you really need to look at them together, and you need to look at them with other economic indicators at your side. Make sure you're getting a good understanding of these. So, economists believe that some degree of unemployment is normal. Indeed, we believe there's some natural rate of unemployment, some normal level of unemployment around which the observed unemployment rate is going to fluctuate. So this kind of deviation of unemployment from its natural rate we call cyclical unemployment. Today we're not going to focus too much on cyclical unemployment except to look at this graph. So the blue line here is where we estimate our natural rate of unemployment. So this is what we want unemployment to look like, right? There's some natural level of unemployment in our economy, and then the actual observed unemployment rate is going to be fluctuating around this number. As far as what is the natural rate of unemployment, well, in 2015, the Congressional Budget Office estimated it to be roughly 4.9%. It's going to be somewhere between 4 and 6, depending on what economist you ask and what the data they are that they're looking at. Notice the unemployment rate is going to spike above the natural rate in very specific instances. So here's one it looks like, here's one it looks like. Oh, and a really big one, like right in here somewhere. You guys see that where I'm talking about? Where the rate observed is much higher than the natural rate. Well, this is essentially we're seeing recessions is when the unemployment rate's above the natural rate of unemployment, right? And these periods where it's much lower than the natural rate would be periods of expansion, right? Periods of intense economic growth. We're not going to get too much into defining recessions and expansions here, just to know, hey, some of this bounciness, this cyclical unemployment, this deviation of unemployment is going to be related to larger economic conditions than just unemployment and kind of work or labor conditions itself. So let's try and start explaining this natural rate of unemployment. Why do we have some rate of unemployment? Well, our first explanation, frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment refers to unemployment that exists as workers search for a job that matches their skills and their tastes. The book gives us several different explanations for why this occurs. Obviously, part of this is just it takes time to connect a skilled person with a role that fits their skills and their tastes. And it takes time once you find out that your company needs to fill a role to find the right person that you want based on your skills and your taste, or your desired skills in the person and your tastes, right? Okay. Another explanation for this frictional unemployment is sectoral shifts, changes in the composition of demand among industries or regions. So maybe an example of this is over the last 20 years or so, the U.S. has decidedly moved away from manufacturing jobs. From 2004 to 2014, lost nearly a little more than 2 million manufacturing jobs in the U.S. as they went abroad and went to where they could be more cheaply fulfilled, right? But at the same time, we got more jobs in other industries, specifically things like computer science and healthcare, very big growth in those during that same time period. So maybe we're moving away from one industry and towards another. Kind of a historical example, hey, around this time 100 years ago, lots of folks were still using carriages, wagons, and riding horses. And then guess what? New industry comes in, thank you, Mr. Ford, and we end up with a big booming car industry. This is going to potentially ruin the livelihoods of a lot of people that spend their days turning leather into saddles or turning wood into wagons or carriages, right? Lots of people lose their jobs as we move, as our economy grows. Unemployment insurance might also play a role in frictional unemployment. Unemployment insurance refers to kind of government benefits that go to protect people from the loss of income associated with losing your job, right? Potentially a very dangerous position to be in. You don't have any work, you can't find any money, so you can't buy food. That's not the ideal spot, right? So we offer people unemployment insurance to help them during this very difficult time, right? Generally, now this isn't an absolute rule, but in most states, unemployment insurance looks something like half of your income for half of the year, about 26 weeks. Roughly half of your income for half of the year is what the typical unemployment insurance looks like. However, it does vary quite a bit from state to state. So what does unemployment insurance have to do with frictional unemployment? Well, unfortunately, as we learned in kind of the first week of this class, people respond to incentives. So if you pay someone to do something, they tend to do more of that thing, even if that thing is not having a job. Now, I know what you're thinking, well, just getting paid part of my income isn't going to keep me from getting a job. Well, that's true, but getting paid none of your income might drive you very quickly to find some kind of job to fill your time to where you're not starving, right? So unemployment insurance kind of takes some of the pressure off finding a new job. I'm not here to say we shouldn't have it. I'm just saying it definitely may offer an incentive to take a little longer and find that job that you really, really want instead of just taking some job to keep your family above water, to keep floating. So these might be a couple explanations for frictional unemployment. The other part of unemployment is going to be structural unemployment. Structural unemployment refers to unemployment that results because there are not enough jobs in specific labor markets for everyone who wants one. So essentially, usually we would just expect, we got all these people lining up who want a job. Usually we just expect the price to fall, right? If there's all kinds of supply in one particular labor market, we'd expect the wage to fall and more people would get hired at lower prices, right? Well, there's a problem with this, and that is wages sometimes aren't allowed to fall through a few different things. We've already talked about one of these, so let's see what some of these might include. So, three possible explanations for why wages are held above equilibrium: minimum wage, efficiency wages, and unions. So if there is a minimum wage, that is a price floor. And I've got an example of a price floor over here. We were operating at this equilibrium. Now, price floor causes us to operate at this higher price, creating a surplus. Of course, a surplus in the labor market we could call unemployment, right? So a price floor is going to look like this, but this isn't the only thing that's going to artificially hold wages high, right? So we've already talked to minimum wage to death. I don't want to hit it too hard today. Efficiency wages, however, I think are very interesting. An efficiency wage is when a company pays a worker more than the equilibrium, the market wage, with the hope that they are more productive. As far as historical examples, we call back to Mr. Henry Ford. He famously more than doubled his workers' pay compared to what the typical other factories were paying. He paid $5 a day. And he had a few different reasons for this. One, he wanted his workers to work hard and be productive. Two, he was sick of people leaving work, right? People being absent. And three, he was sick of people leaving the job altogether. He was sick of his high turnover rate. So he said, if I pay people more, they're going to be more invested. They're going to want to feel like they're part of this team and produce a little more. And hey, according to Ford, he's absolutely able to do this. He says raising his wages was the biggest cost-cutting venture he ever did. Now, there might be some other things going on in this. Another argument he made back in the day was, I want everyone who works for me to be able to afford to buy one of my cars, which certainly makes sense. Maybe your own workers can represent part of your demand, right? So all these things play into efficiency wages. As far as a more kind of large, more recent example, I should say, more recent example, I think the fast food market some companies decide that they ought to pay efficiency wages, and some decide that they should just pay the market wage. When I think of the market wage, folks, I think of your Burger Kings, your McDonald's, places like this, right? They pay the literal least that they can so that they can just get the food out the door, right? Some other places decide, I'm not just going to pay the market wage, I'm going to pay a higher wage to try and encourage productivity and less absenteeism. The places I picture, oh, your places like Chick-fil-A, your places like Raising Cane's, right? Sometimes paying $14, $15, $16 an hour. I saw an ad for hiring folks for In-N-Out Burger out on the West Coast, offering more than $19 an hour. So these efficiency wages this might be an example of efficiency wages, as these companies try to pay a little more to get a higher quality worker, right? And lastly here, unions might also artificially hold the wage above the equilibrium price. You know, unions bargain in a collective way. They all group up and try to make a case for why they deserve higher pay, better benefits, or better working conditions, this sort of thing, right? And of course, implied in this bargaining is if you don't pay us more, if you don't fix our working conditions, then we will strike. We will not work. We will have an organized withdrawal of labor, right? So they're able to, through collective bargaining, artificially hold the price high. So whether it is the minimum wage, efficiency wages, or unions, there's various things that can hold this price above equilibrium and create unemployment. And this essentially is what we're talking about when we say structural unemployment. More or less, this is a big part of the idea. Well, that's where we're going to leave it today. So thank you guys very much. Tune in next week. I'm sure we'll have some great new stuff. Bye-bye.